Well, one of the topics that many people find challenging to understand is security in relation to 802.11 networks and other wireless network protocols as well. And one of the reasons for that is a lot of people involved in wireless administration early on in their career do not come from a security background. So in addition to understanding all of the RF stuff and all of the wireless communication processes, they have to understand security concepts as well. Well, we've got one of the best people to talk to you about one of the newer security capabilities of 802.11, the WPA3 certification from the Wi-Fi Alliance, which of course is based on technologies in the 802.11 standard. And Stephen Orr is going to talk to us about WPA3. He comes with more than 20 years of background at Cisco, and he's going to tell you what WPA3 is all about. So let's bring Stephen Orr on right now.
Hey everyone, thanks for the invitation for allowing me to present the WPA3 Advancements in Wireless Security to the Wireless Tech Forum 2020. Appreciate the opportunity. Apologies we couldn't be there in person. Love a live audience, being able to be in front of everybody. But you know, we'll do the best we can with what we have. I've got roughly 30 to 35 minutes to go through the content. We are going to talk about WPA3, so I will flip to the next slide in our agenda. As you can see, it's pretty simple. It says Wi-Fi certified WPA3. We're going to go over a bunch of new things. You know, again, what could be coming out, what we're working on in the Wi-Fi Alliance, and some other things that are going on in the industry. So before I start, just want to pop up my disclaimer. All views today are being made by the mild-mannered Cisco engineer, myself, not the chair of the Wi-Fi Security TG or as a representative of the Wi-Fi Alliance, even though in my day job, I am a Cisco distinguished architect. I do have the opportunity and the privilege to be able to work on the Wi-Fi Alliance and work with a great bunch of people to be able to kind of bring, whether it's new capabilities, work with the standards community, really just kind of evolving security and bringing the best capabilities and best products we have to offer to the community. One thing before I want to go, if you didn't get a chance to watch this session yesterday, I'm just going to call out Phil Morgan. He did a great job on doing the wireless security foundations. I know he covered some of the stuff from WPA2 and some of the stuff for WPA3. So what I'm going to attempt to do is not, you know, go back over the material Phil went over. I'm going to try to add to it in the limited time that we have, so get the best for everybody. Again, so kind of where I live in my life dealing with security technologies in the industry. So this is kind of my timeline, right? Where everybody's pretty much smiley and happy, where we don't have any attacks. Everybody believes we're secured. Then there's an attack that's published. Then it gets into the media, and then there's mass scale panic. And once it hits the media, you know, everything is hellfire and brimstone and the world is coming to an end. There's a security fix that gets developed behind the scenes, and then suddenly we're back to normal. Now, what this tells me is for the majority of the life cycle of security, nobody's really paying attention. Nobody's really worried. They just expect it to work. They expect it to be there. So one of the things that we try to do is we're constantly trying to look at not just Wi-Fi security, but security in general as a paradigm, and how we can continue to adapt and evolve it over time, instead of just jumping from attack to attack or breach to breach to figure it out. You know, one of the major accomplishments that we've had over the last few years is WPA3 becoming mandatory as of July 1st, 2020. So for all new Wi-Fi Alliance certifications, WPA3 is now mandatory. And I throw the Star Trek logo up here because it truly has been a 5-year mission. A lot of great companies have been behind this, working on it behind the scenes for quite a long time. And it's not just necessarily in the Wi-Fi Alliance, it's in the IEEE, the IETF. We take stuff from a bunch of different places, and we really try to bring the best thing we can to market. So when I look at what the road to Wi-Fi protected access, whether it was 2 or 3 or where we are, I kind of view myself as the rock'em sock'em robot down at the bottom. we take input from the IETF. We obviously use 802.11 and IEEE. It comes into the Wi-Fi Alliance, and then as vendors, we all work together to take things from different aspects and how do we merge these together, or how do we work on product or work on pieces to increase the overall security of Wi-Fi, not just for today, but we try to look out, as I said, it's taken 5 years for us to get WPA3 out. We really try to take a little bit longer term vision. Now, at the end of the day, it's all about compromise, right? So we all work together. We've all got to drive our, agendas. And when I say agendas, it's not necessarily company agenda. It's more agenda for how we envision or how we view wireless security in the paradigm and where we want to go. So just a quick overview of where we are from a Wi-Fi Alliance program history. Again, I know Phil had covered some of this. Everything started with WEP, then WPA, WPA3. So what you see is in those early stages, we did this thing called WPA, then it kind of sat there, and we really didn't do much with it until there was a breach or an attack. Then we did this thing called WPA version 2. We timed it with the release of 802.11i. We tried to fix some stuff there. At the same time, nothing was really done with WPA2 for quite some time. We dove into WPS, which doesn't fall into the WPA family. It was a Wi-Fi Alliance mechanism. Again, that had some challenges with it. What you've seen is Wi-Fi Easy Connect. That's an offshoot program where they're trying to deal with some similar but new challenges where they can actually do onboarding and other things. But really where it starts to get interesting is in 2017, again, crack was introduced. So there was an industry response to crack. We mitigated that with enhancements to WPA2 in 2018, finally releasing a finished product of WPA, the initial product of WPA3 in 2018. Now, I will say that 2018 was the release date. So we were working on WPA3 long before crack. So we had already known about some of the frailties of WPA2, and we invested a lot of time and effort. Again, as I said, it was years before crack was introduced. It just so happens that the timing worked where crack was introduced or discovered. We patched WPA2 as best we could, and then we released WPA3 on schedule in 2018. At the same time, we also released Enhanced Open, which I'll go over in 2018 as well. So 2018 was a big year for us. As with anything, when you release something new, everybody's going to try to poke holes and see where they can find out what they can do to, exploit those new security protocols. So that was in 2019. So as I show on here, you are here. One of the cool things that we've done with WPA3 is continual development, continual work. So as you see in WPA3 in December of 2019, we had a release. And in that release, I'll go over a couple of the features that came in there. And then in December of 2020, which is right around the corner for us, we have some additional features, all falling under the WPA3 brand. So as I said, difference between what we did from WPA3 to from WPA2 to WPA3, it's not just about the brand name, it's about how we're operating. The operational impact is WPA2 was kind of set. WPA3, we're continually looking at how to fix, or not fix, we're looking at how to enhance all the time, where we've been, where we're going. At the same time, one of the interesting thing that really gets overlooked in WPA3 is it's not just about interoperability, which is what the Wi-Fi Alliance is known for. We're also doing conformance testing. So basically making sure bad stuff doesn't happen. Like if you have a bad acting station, what's the impact on the AP? Or if you have a bad acting AP, what's the impact on the station? So we try to make sure we introduce negative test cases along the way to make sure that we try to catch a lot of things that could happen before they're released out in the wild. So with that, let's move on to I call it Open Networks Get an Upgrade. So this is Wi-Fi Certified Enhanced Open. It is its own certification. So when you're looking for a product to see if it supports Enhanced Open, you got to look on the logo to see if it's a Wi-Fi Certified Enhanced Open product. So why did we do it? What's the problem we were trying to solve? The biggest problem that's out there, if you look at open networks, right? They are what they are. They're open. So, passive eavesdropping, that's the primary thing, right? So that was one of the main targets that we looked at for enhanced open. Again, it's not perfect in the sense where it's not authenticated, right? So this is unauthenticated encryption. It is a way for us to mitigate passive eavesdropping. That is all. That's why it's lumped into the discussion of privacy, not necessarily security. And there have never been any claims around enhanced open from the Wi-Fi Alliance that we claim that there are any claims of man-in-the-middle prevention. This is really just if I'm, instead of running open, I do enhanced open, and at least I have the forethought and the knowledge that I'm encrypting all of my traffic, as opposed to just blasting it out, open in the air, and having people be able to easily sniff my traffic. So again, this is one of those things where, like, hey, here's a problem. What can we do to mitigate some of the open networks? And we use some of the technologies that were available in the IETF in this case, which was opportunistic wireless encryption, RFC 8110. We adopted it, brought it in, and then we got it into a certification program. So if we look at, and I wanted to throw in some packet captures for everybody so they can, if they haven't messed around with some of these features, you get to see a little bit of it. So in enhanced open, so there's a couple different modes, and I'll talk about that. In enhanced open only mode, what we see is, again, classic, cipher suites where in this is, we're just using AES 128 CCMP, but the AKM is different. The AKM is 18. So 000F AC 18, which signifies OWE. And the other cool thing that we do here is management frame protection is required. So as you see down there, it says management frame protection required equals true. One of the things that we wanted to make sure was that we, management frame protection for a while has been an optional program. It doesn't have to be turned on by default or enabled or negotiated. One of the things is we moved through WPA3 behind the scenes. For WPA3 only devices, even enhanced open devices, we want to make sure management frame protection was on, enabled by default, and negotiated. So that is a big thing. Most people don't see it, but it's an under the cover mechanism that we did to proliferate management frame protection. The other piece to this was transition mode for enhanced open. So we know there's a lot of, what will be a lot of legacy open networks. So we wanted to make sure that we had a seamless experience for those devices that could only run open versus those devices that were coming out that ran enhanced open. So what happens is when you have an enhanced open certified access point and you create an open SSID, it automatically enables an enhanced open SSID at the same time. So now I have two BSSs, but one is hidden. The enhanced open one is hidden. Now, why did we hide it? What we found when we did some initial testing is because of legacy station behavior. If they see an enhanced open BSS, so basically it's an open network with encryption, those legacy stations, the best way I can put it, get confused at what they're seeing. So what may happen is when you click on a network that looks like it's open, it could pop up a dialog box asking for PSK. It could pop up a dialog box opening up for .1x because it sees the encryption. We didn't want to have a poor user experience. So we've got this transition mode that we built in. Now, again, this is my Steve Orr hat on. In my experience in doing security, with regards to security, nothing good ever comes out of transition modes, ever. We try to mitigate for poor user experience, but at the same time, what does it mean? We've got two SSIDs or two BSSs, and one's more secure than the other, and people don't know what they're connecting to. So I'll touch on this in a little bit as well. Here's just a quick view of what happens with enhanced open transition mode. On the left, we've got our open SSID, and inside that open SSID, what we're doing is we have a vendor-specific transition mode element. So we see this vendor-specific element, and in it, what we're basically saying is, I'm going to tell you in the open beacon message what the enhanced open BSS ID is. So why did we do this? We did this so that if you're listening to an open network, those stations that can support enhanced open know exactly where to go for the enhanced open SSID that's being hidden. So we did this basically to ease some of the transition, right? On the enhanced open SSID, right? In this case, I called it eOpen for enhanced open. We're actually also advertising the BSS and the SSID of the open network. So again, it's a way for both networks to know about each other since they're both linked. And you know what we try to strive for on this is that the networks themselves will have similar capabilities associated to those two SSIDs. And again, once transition mode, once we move past the point where open networks aren't needed anymore, you can deprecate the open SSID and move forward just with the enhanced open SSID, and you're on to your next generation of networks. One of the other things to cover is, everybody always asks, what's the difference between WPA2 and WPA3? And, again, I'm slightly older, so 3, it is a magic number. So, a couple things to look at. First, there's no information element that designates WPA3 from WPA2. There was for WPA and WPA2, but what we didn't do was create a new IE designator for it. We just didn't, not only did we not think about it, we didn't think it was relevant to push forward and create yet another differentiator. But what WPA3 really is, the definition of WPA3 is the combination of AKM, cipher suites, and PMF combinations that exist. So again, when you think about how I configure security in wireless, you pick an AKM, you pick your cipher suite, and then PMF, you enable it, you disable it. Now in WPA3, obviously, because we're pushing PMF, we're not allowing it to be disabled, right? As I said before, WPA3 is about continuous security development. Again, we've got multiple features over the last 3 years, right? So we released in 2018 WPA3, and we've continued on a yearly basis to increase the security, to add features to it. And really, as I said, we're looking out, and we're trying to look out even further to see how we keep up and actually, look far enough forward, to be able to stay ahead of any potential security issues. Again, as I said, PMF must be negotiated, so management frame protection, and it's not optional. So if you're going to be designated as WPA3, that's what you have to do. PMF has to be on. And for everything Wi-Fi 6 and newer, as I said in the beginning, it's mandatory. WPA3 is the starting point. Now, you can support you have to support WPA2, Personal or Enterprise, but WPA3 is non-negotiable. It has to be supported. So just a quick level set, right? So WPA3, there's a difference between the brand and the modes of operation. So we have a couple different modes of operation, right? So we have WPA3 Personal. Again, this would be very similar to what you would see in WPA2 Personal, or sometimes referred to as WPA2 PSK. But with WPA3 Personal, right, it's passphrase based. So we have an SAE mode, which is what we used from the IEEE to basically do passphrase based authentication. And then we also have a WPA3 SAE transition mode. This WPA3 SAE transition mode allows us to create a single SSID and create that backward compatibility to WPA2 PSK, right? Or WPA2 Personal. So it gives us a single SSID with the ability to move between the two. Again, this is mainly for transition mode, or for having a single SSID for older stations and for newer stations. Then we have WPA3 Enterprise, which most people are familiar with. We have a WPA3 Enterprise only mode. Again, difference between WPA3 Enterprise and WPA2 Enterprise, PMF has to be negotiated. That is the big differentiator between WPA2 and WPA3 Enterprise. The transition mode, this transition mode exists because, again, I can have a station that may be doing WPA2 Enterprise and not have PMF turned on. That means it's a WPA2 connection. If it negotiates PMF, it's then considered a WPA3 station. So again, it's subtle, but it's part of the building blocks where we're starting to move forward. And then we have this new thing called WPA3 Enterprise 192. This was really for our more security conscious customers, right? Everybody's like, oh, it's built just for the federal government, and it's really not. The whole tenet behind WPA3 192 was consistent cryptographic cipher suites. The 192-bit means I have 192 bits of security end to end for everything, whether it's PMF, whether it's for the over-the-air, the unicast ciphers, the group ciphers, even when you're doing ETLS, which is the cipher suite that the authentication method is that we're using AES GCM ECC again at a 192-bit strength. So again, went for consistency really for the most part. So what does WPA3 Personal only look like? Again, really, as I said, it's a combination of cipher suites, AKMs, management frame protection, and then, you know, if you look at it, we've got our cipher suites, which are AES 128. Our AKM is 000F AC08. Again, this is designated as SAE, and management frame protection is required. So again, that is the definition from a technical perspective of a WPA3 Personal station. If I move into what is WPA3 Personal transition mode, I have the same cipher suites that are there. Now, what I see that's different is I have multiple AKMs on the same SSID. So I can have a PSK SHA-256, and then SAE, all being advertised on the same SSID, which means I can connect with any one of those AKMs on that SSID. Now, if you're a WPA3 Personal certified station, you will connect at SAE before you connect it as at a PSK, as a WPA2 PSK. That is part of the logic that's built into the stations. You should always connect at the highest security level. Now, when we move down, you see management frame protection is set to capable, right? So basically, you've got MFP required set to false, MFP capable set to true, which means negotiate protected management frames if you're capable. If you're a WPA3 station running SAE, you must negotiate management frame protection. Otherwise, you won't connect. That is a negative test that gets run on it. Transition mode, again, just talking about transition mode a little bit deeper. You know, this is kind of a funny slide for me where it's like, hey, it's 2020. Why are we still doing transition modes on, you know, on a single BSS when most APs can support multiple BSSs today? Again, it's really created just to preserve interoperability and backward compatibility. But, and I will say this strongly, but the problem is we inherit the security challenges from the lower security profiles, right? So if the same passphrase exists between WPA2 PSK, WPA3, you know, for the, and I mislabeled it here, I apologize, it's not PSK, it should be SAE. Basically, you're inheriting access to the network. You know, SAE uses the passphrase and computes it differently to get your keys, but what you're doing is you're getting access to the network. The upside for WPA3 though is, you know, the connections are more secure. Knowing the passphrase gets anybody access to the wireless network, not the ability to decrypt the end user sessions. Now, what I will tell you is, again, this is my mantra, nothing ever good comes from transition modes. Transition modes bring a wealth of things like downgrade attacks, and we've had to do some things to try to mitigate downgrade attacks as well. Moving on to WPA3 Enterprise 192, again, just a quick look. Again, we look at our group ciphers. The big difference here, we've moved from AES 128 CCMP to AES 256 GCMP. So that's a big change from a security perspective. And then our AKM is different. Our AKM is 000FAC12, which is basically saying that I have to use SHA-384, which is designated as Suite B. And then management frame protection is required. And I also changed my broadcast integrity protocol to AES GMAC 256. Again, you know, across the board, strengthening what we're doing for security. Now, on the TLS side, which I don't point out here, which we're using for the authentication mechanism, with that, we have similar cipher suites in there. I just didn't want to add it to the complexity of the slides. So these kind of bring us to where we are today from what most people know about WPA3. Now, what I'd like to share with everybody that is a hidden gem that most people aren't aware of. These links actually will take you to the Wi-Fi Alliance security links. We have published publicly a lot of our material, whether it's the tech specs, tech spec addendums. We've done some documentation on security considerations, and then there's even that last one that says security development. There's interesting stuff located there. Anyone can provide feedback on our security specs for the Wi-Fi Alliance. So I highly recommend that you go out, take a look, and provide feedback if you'd like. But a lot of cool information is held there. You know, we're trying to move into a more transparent state where we're giving people a little bit of heads up on what's going on and allow some input. So having said that, so then WPA3, we said, hey, look, the first launch went well. What can we add to it? What can we do? So we came up and looked at a couple things that we recognized as potential challenges and some things that may have been overlooked. One thing was fast BSS transition. We realized that there wasn't consolidated testing or oversight to fast BSS transitioning. And then we looked at things like server cert validation. So I'll get into those fairly quickly in a minute. With fast BSS transition, everybody knows 802.11r. What we try to do is take all the stuff that was going on in 11r throughout the Wi-Fi Alliance and really consolidate fast transition and run it through a series of tests, right? It used to be just in voice. So what we want to do is bring it into the security fold and again, run it through some negative test cases, make sure fast transition was working correctly across the board. It is an optional certification for Wi-Fi certified WPA3 devices. Again, it's going to be designated on the individual cert. So one of the cool things that came out of this was we created an AKM preference order for stations. So if you see an SSID that has multiple AKMs on it for WPA3 Personal, it's going to want to prefer to connect to FT SAE, then SAE, FT using PSK, then PSK using SHA-256, and then just a PSK network. So we tried to put some organization and a little bit more order into the selection of the AKMs when you're negotiating onto a Wi-Fi network. The same thing with Enterprise. So FT auth using SHA-256, regular authentication using SHA-256, and then authentication using SHA-1 kind of being the lowest. Again, from a security perspective, we want to try to go most secure down to least secure. So server cert validation, this is a big one. So server cert validation, we looked at things like, you know, during those EAP authentications using TLS-based protocols, preventing evil twin man-in-the-middle attacks during that TLS credential exchange. So what we want to do is create some rules around making sure that the client, the station, is validating the actual server cert. So normally what we typically saw was, you know, the server validates the client, but it wasn't being mutually done where I'm also as a station validating the server certificate. So what we focused on was a couple different pieces. As we kind of peeled back the onion on it, we learned a bunch of stuff. Like we had to come up with a way for what we called a user override of server certificates. This was, you know, if this server certificate validation failed, and this USOC feature was not enabled by a trust override policy, you know, basically how do we still get that device on the network? So this actually allows a user to accept trust in a certificate as long as this trust override disable isn't on. So trust override disable is a way for the network administrator to really lock down that station on which radius servers it trusts. So what we did was we boiled it down into two pieces. There's this thing called trust override disable strict. So it's a strict policy. So it disallows you overriding any EAP exchange. Basically, if you don't have a certificate on there that's valid, that you can you know, validate the radius server, including the first connection on the network, it's going to fail. With TOD trust on first use or TOFU, this actually allows you to use a first-time connection. Kind of, it's like a leap of faith that you're trusting the server the first time that you're authenticating to it. So again, what we looked at really was, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? We've got these things where from an enterprise perspective, we're trying to mitigate these evil twins or hardening of the authentication mechanism. So we had an incremental release. And then in this year, this is a cool look ahead. We've got some updates that came out or that will be coming out for 2020. As I said, these nuggets are all in those documents. They're sitting on the Wi-Fi Alliance security website that, again, please go visit, take a look at. We've got things where we've hardened SAE. Again, everybody saw Dragon Blood and a couple things that came out of it. Most of these are actually mitigations to some of the things that came out of Dragon Blood. We've got beacon protection, operating channel validation, a cool new thing called AP validation in public networks, and then things that we did really around client privacy or MAC address randomization that are coming out as well. So just to dive into these real quick, in this, what we have is this hash to element function. It's just really a different way that we're computing the password element from the with SAE. So before it was a hunt and peck mechanism. What they want to do in order to harden that, some side channel attacks and some other things. What we did was we were basically taking and computing the password element, this password element ahead of time. So instead of doing it while you're actually doing the association, you're computing the password element ahead of time, basically according to the Diffie-Hellman groups that you're using. So again, keeping it more secure from these side channel attacks. However, it does have a backward compatibility mode, so that if the station doesn't support hash to element, you can still fall back to the hunting pecking mechanism or vice versa. So part of H2E though, it is supported in the new RSN extension elements, and that's what helps us, again, get into that fallback mechanism as well. Two other things that we came out with. So two of the other cool things that we have are beacon protection and operating channel validation. These things are, again, part of 802.11 RevMD. So as part of RevMD, beacon protection, again, when we looked at things that were going on, and again, whether it had anything to do with, side channel attacks or helping man in the middle of attacks or other things, what we wanted to do is try to protect, to again, enhance that protection and make sure that we were able to mitigate any potential attack. So beacon protection, we're securing the beacon frames. OCV, this is actually helping us secure the operating channel such that you can't have a channel switch announcement that's not validated. This was another way that you can easily do or easily get subjected to this evil twin attack by having somebody do a channel switch. You connect to the new AP that's on a similar BSS, and the next thing you know, you've got a man in the middle going on. Again, that's all part of the standard. It's introduced in RevMD as it is. Now, one of the interesting things that we've come up with in order to mitigate some of the downgrade attacks, and when I say downgrade, the transition mode attacks, is this transition disabled indication feature. This is basically an indicator that comes from the AP to the station, and it's going to tell the station which transition modes to disable, right? So the transition algorithms, right, are let's say the least secure. So basically the AP is going to tell the supplicant in that profile, say for WPA3 Personal, it's going to say, hey, don't use your transition mechanisms or don't enable your transition mechanism for this profile. Only use SAE or only use WPA3 Enterprise AKM or only use Enhanced Open. So it's a way for the network to signal to the stations that transition modes aren't being used on the network or on this this SSID. So don't get confused or don't get tricked into going to a less secure or downgrading to a less secure encryption mechanism. AP validation in public networks. We looked at this problem. This was an interesting one where we had authentication between an AP and a station, right? Using just regular passwords. We can get into these evil twin attacks again. What we wanted to do here was, kind of help mitigate that AP, that station from, connecting to any AP. We wanted to make sure it was a valid AP. So we came up with some tools to enable it. We actually made the working name or the mechanism behind the scenes is called SAE Public Key. So it's an extension to what everybody knows as SAE authentication. But during the AP SAE confirmation message to the station, there's a new element that gets included. And in that element is the AP's public key, a modifier value, and then a digital signature that has the MAC addresses of the AP and stay. It's signed with the private key. And then the station can then use, once it verifies the public key, it uses the fingerprint code and the password to do the verification. So an example password, as you see right there, A2BC-DE3F-GHI4. The dashes are very specific designators to help us determine whether it's an SAE public key passphrase or just a regular SAE passphrase. So again, the digital signature is sent in there, and everything is encoded in that actual passphrase. So it really does help us validate whether that's a real AP or not. So again, you'll see this feature come out soon. Again, you know, we're just wrapping up on it now, and you can read all up on it in those documents I referenced before. The big topic at hand now is MAC randomization, client privacy, right? So this was all part of 802.11aq and RevMD, and this is actually, you know, with some of the new operating systems coming out, this is kind of the new buzzword of the day. Everything that's going on around MAC randomization and how do we minimize the threat vector of personally identifiable information exposure. When the certification is offered up, it's going to be an optional certification, but if you do the certification, the station is going to have it on and enabled by default. So what are we protecting? What we end up protecting with randomized MAC addresses is, you know, the station is going to construct a randomized MAC address per SSID within that profile, unless it's being specifically told to use its unique MAC address, but the station's really going to try to construct a new randomized MAC address for an SSID whenever it tries to connect. We also have it set so that during active scanning, when it's not associated to a BSS, it'll use randomized MAC addresses, and also for each ANQP exchange while not associated to a BSS. So we're really trying to make sure that from a PII tracking perspective, you know, we're enabling that station to remain as anonymous as possible. Now, the flip side of that, what does that bring us? The flip side is we have this push-pull with privacy and NetOps, right? There's always a delicate balance between privacy and operational goals. Randomized MAC addresses can and they will impact enterprise as well as, you know, residential network operations. Unfortunately, they do have a similar impact. For those that remember IPv6 privacy addresses, when we did IPv6 privacy addresses, the ability to implement ACLs and other things was a hard lesson learned. So again, things that we're going to learn along the way, there'll be some bumps along the path. So I do have a quick slide on randomized MAC addresses. Really what we're looking at is, you know, the B1 bit is set to 1, which means it's locally administered. So what you see is anybody that has a MAC address where the first octet ends in 26 A and E, you know it's a randomized MAC address. So you're going to start to see more and more of these pop up as you upgrade your operating system. You know, and when I say options to deal with randomized MAC addresses, this isn't necessarily me saying, hey, go turn off randomized MAC addresses. It's if you're in an enterprise scenario and you have a need to be able to issue policy or specific connection, you know, specific connections for MAC addresses, you can use an MDM to push policies to clients. You can always offer the end user a pop-up to say, hey, look, if you want to connect to your network, you're going to have to turn off randomized MAC addresses. There's also a way to do it with an AP policy, or you can use your AAA server to create a policy recognizing locally administered MACs and address the connection there. So again, a lot of learning in process as we move forward. And I know we're trying to wrap up. I'm almost at my time. So looking at what's on the horizon, you know, we've got Wi-Fi 6E coming out. We've got 60 gigahertz. We've got all these other things coming out. So what we wanted to do is address the new MAC PHY bands, right? So in these clean slate MAC PHY bands, we've made WPA3 the starting point. So WPA3 Personal, WPA3 Enterprise. We are not supporting legacy WPA2 or WPA at all in those greenfield bands. We're also eliminating open networks. If you have a use case requirement for an open network in your in that MAC PHY, you have to support enhanced open. And then some of the other things that we took off the table were no transition modes. So my small victory. So we won't have any transition modes in those new MAC PHY bands. So moving forward, so 2020 and beyond, you know, what do we focus on? So this is where we need input from great groups like this. You know, security is really an obscure technology. What do we want? What do the end users want? We're listening. You know, we're trying to focus 3 to 5 years out. So this is a huge opportunity for feedback and input. So in a nutshell, really in wrapping up, you know, hopefully I was able to convey that, you know, this is a work in progress. WPA3 is not a static security protocol, security certification. We are in continuous development, continuous upgrades and continuous work on this. So it is not a one and done program. We are continuing a ton of effort in a multi-year endeavor on continuing forward with WPA3. So, again, go check your certifications. They are listed out on the Wi-Fi Alliance website. Again, thankfully, July of 2020 this year, we moved forward and WPA3 is required. So again, in wrapping up, I do have a shameless self-plug for myself. Basically, a couple of us at Cisco worked on examining the security of Wi-Fi 6 and 5G. Please take a read. Awesome document. I like to think where we kind of put Wi-Fi 6 and 5G, looked at them side by side from a security perspective, and did a couple analysis. So with that, I hope we'll get some great questions. I appreciate the time and look forward to hearing from you. My contact information is on the front of the slide, so please feel free to reach out. Would love to get feedback, would love to hear from everybody. And thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
We're live.
Great.
Hey, here we are with Stephen, and we're going to be talking about your questions related to WPA3. Stephen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate you guys allowing me to be here.
Absolutely. Well, there were several questions that came in, and those have been answered in the Q&A panel with text, and there are just a couple of them we want to address in a little more detail. So if you want to see the quick answers to all of the questions, they are in the Q&A panel. But if you want to hear a little more extensive answers, we're going to talk about just a couple of these. So first of all, so there were some questions in chat and Q&A and issues about WPA3 evolving. And by the way, it's not just WPA3. WPA2 did the same thing. So, toward the end of its life, if we want to call it end of life, but toward the end there, when we had the crack vulnerability come out, it was very quick that they updated the certification to make sure that was included. And so we do see these certifications evolving. So how do we keep up with that, Stephen?
So it's a great question. So one is we haven't abandoned WPA2. If we find issues in it, we're still maintaining it and we're still working on it. When we create any new features or we work on any new features that may come from the IEEE, the IETF, the group as a whole, we try to focus them on WPA3 now, because at some point you want to kind of move the evolution forward. So we've really focused on any new security features kind of, maintaining or staying and starting with the WPA3 brand as we kind of transition into the future.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in addition to that, what are we looking at as far as the 6 gigahertz band, and what were the motivations behind not going with WPA2 there or transition mode?
Yeah, so one of the things that we when we looked at how to work with the new bands, and again, this is new MAC-5 bands. So in those new MAC-5 bands, what we looked at was how do we it's a fresh starting point. Can we actually move forward without supporting any don't take this wrong, what I would call legacy security, right? So anything that came before WPA3, is it a good time for us to just start off and say, WPA3 is the starting point for these new bands, and move forward and not have to worry about, transition mode, interoperability with TKIP and WEP as we had to do with WPA2, and just give us a fresh start and a new foundation to build on for the next generation.
Absolutely. And is there anything else you'd like to share related to the whole process at the Wi-Fi Alliance and your role there and all the rest?
Yeah, and I appreciate everybody's comments. So, the Wi-Fi Alliance, like most of the other standards body, it's made up of, a bunch of phenomenal people and companies that, it's a tough job for everybody to get together, and everybody's doing it a couple times a week. And, it's all about compromise. And I have it in one of my first slides, and really my role is just to help everybody, kind of shepherd things forward and compromise. It's an absolute team effort by all the member companies involved. And as I said, we're becoming more transparent. We've opened up, security review information so you can go online, provide feedback, provide comments. And I think kind of the next phase for me as a vendor or others is, we need to take feedback, and whether it's use cases or other things on, tell us what you'd like to see about security. And that way we can bring in some of those next generation use cases when we're looking at what to do in the future.
Excellent. Well, Stephen, I appreciate you being with us live today and talking a little bit with the group and all the efforts you put together getting this presentation for us. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a great weekend coming up.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Take care.